Nero's Castrated Bride, Rome's darkest love story. They tried to bury. I saw him once. Not the man. Not truly. What I saw was the shadow of a soul already shattered, dressed in silks too fine for any mortal boy. Eyes cast downward like a prisoner who had learned long ago that eye contact could cost him everything. They called him Sabina. But once, long before the knives and the powders and the lies, he had another name. Sporus. That name is ash now, buried under 2,000 years of silence and spectacle. But I remember. I remember the day his story burned itself into mine. It began in the age of marble gods and golden lies. Rome, 67 AD. A city that reeked of incense and blood. Statues watched from every archway. Senators whispered behind robes heavier than their own morality. And in the center of it all, there walked a god masquerading as a man. Nero. He wore the crown of an emperor and the madness of a poet. They said he played the lyre while cities burned. But I don't think that's the worst of what he did. Not by far. He wasn't always a monster. In the beginning, they called him promising. A boy king with charm and vision. He lowered taxes. He gave the people games. He sang on stage and let Rome believe in joy again. But power, real, unchecked power, is not a crown. It's a mirror. And for Nero, what he saw in that mirror was not a man. It was a god. A god who could do anything. Who could love. Who could destroy. Who could remake the world to his own broken image. And so came Poppaea, his second wife, his obsession. They said she glowed like polished amber under the sun, that when she walked into a room, men forgot their names and women forgot to speak. She was beauty wrapped in brilliance, ambition wrapped in silk, and Nero, for a time, was hers completely. But obsession is not love. It is a fire that cannot warm. It only consumes. He watched her like a hawk watches prey. He dressed her in gold, mined from corners of the empire men had died to reach. He painted her in portraits until her face was everywhere, yet never enough. And then, one night, in a fit of rage over something trivial, a performance, a delay, a moment of honesty, he struck her. A single blow, or maybe more. The records blur. But what they agree on is this. They took the boy's manhood, cut it away in the name of love, twisted into something monstrous. They called it medicine. It was mutilation. And when the blood dried, Nero gave the boy a new name, Sabina. He dressed him in the dead empress's gowns, painted his lips in the same color, taught him to walk as she had walked, to smile as she had smiled, to lie as she had lived. Then came the wedding. Yes, the wedding. Gold-draped arches, musicians playing lullabies written for ghosts, senators pretending not to see the truth, a god marrying a corpse reanimated in silk and silence. Rome watched, and Rome obeyed. They toasted to the union, toasted to madness, toasted to cruelty dressed in ceremony, and Sporus no. Sabina now smiled, because smiling was safer than screaming. For 2 years, he played his part, sat beside the emperor at banquets, rode in litters through cheering crowds, nodded politely as Nero whispered memories of a life Sporus had never lived.
Every morning, he woke in rooms that smelled like her perfume. Every night, he lay beside a man who saw someone else when he touched him. This was not survival. It was erasure. But Sporus was a good actor. He had to be. Because in Rome, mistakes bled. And then, as Rome always does, the empire turned. Revolts, betrayals, the Senate rising at last. Nero ran, and like a cursed relic, he took his living doll with him. They hid in a villa, surrounded by shadows and whispers. Nero spoke of suicide, of poetry, of escape, of glory, of death. And when the soldiers came knocking, he took his own life. He did it clumsily, as if even death wasn't something he could command properly. But Sporus lived. Only and not for long. He was a symbol now, a curiosity, a political pawn, passed from man to man, each one using him as Nero had, dressing him, displaying him, calling him by a name that was never his. And then, a new horror, the arena. They wanted him to reenact myths, violent ones, humiliating ones, rape dressed up as art, entertainment for the masses. That was the final straw. They say he drank poison, quietly, without ceremony. He died before the games, not yet 20. I wonder sometimes what his real name sounded like before the whispers began, before his voice was taught to rise like a girl's, before his body was bent into a grave, wearing another woman's crown. We'll never know. History only remembers him as a curiosity, a joke, a footnote in the tales of mad emperors. But I remember him differently, as the boy who said no, finally. The boy who took back his fate in the only way left to him. In a world that stripped him of everything name, body, will he still found a sliver of freedom in death. That is not weakness. That is defiance. And though his voice was silenced, though his story was warped by time and mockery, there is still something sacred in remembering it now as it really was. Not a tale of decadence, but of a soul stolen and a spark that refused to go quietly. Sporus was not a symbol. He was someone. He was someone.